The sun was just starting to set when the transport bus crossed into my hometown. After 10 months on the US-Mexico border, the sight of familiar streets felt almost unreal. I had left in the heat of midsummer, and now autumn's chill was creeping into the air. The houses looked smaller, the trees taller, and every corner felt like it was whispering, "Welcome back." I sat by the window, still in my camouflage uniform, boots dusty from the last patrol just 3 days ago. My name tag read Turner, but to everyone who mattered, I was simply David. Staff Sergeant David Turner, 36 years old, father of one boy, husband to the woman I thought I'd grow old with. Serving on the border was nothing like my tours overseas. It wasn't about crossing deserts in convoys or dodging gunfire in foreign cities. This was America, my own country, yet I was patrolling dangerous terrain every day, chasing cartel runners, intercepting smugglers, and dealing with people desperate enough to risk everything for a chance to cross. The job was relentless. The days started before dawn and ended after midnight. Sometimes I'd go weeks without a full night's sleep. But through it all, I kept one thing close to my heart: the image of my little boy's smile. Ethan, 7 years old. When I left, he clung to my leg at the bus station, asking if I would be back in time for Christmas. I told him I'd be home before the leaves turned brown. That promise kept me going through the blistering heat, the dust storms, and the endless tension of the border. Every night before I closed my eyes, I pictured coming home, wrapping my arms around him, and feeling the weight of my absence lift. The bus stopped at the depot, and I stepped off, the air crisp against my skin. My duffel bag felt heavier than it should, but maybe it wasn't the bag. Maybe it was everything I was carrying inside. The exhaustion, the longing, and the quiet fear that 10 months had changed more than just me. My plan had been to surprise them. No calls, no texts. Just walk through the front door and see their faces light up. I even stopped at a small diner near the edge of town to grab Ethan's favorite, a slice of warm apple pie wrapped in foil. The closer I got to my street, the more my heart raced. I could already imagine his footsteps pounding across the living room, the sound of Daddy echoing off the walls. I smiled to myself, quickening my pace. That's when I heard it. Laughter. Not from inside the house, only from the backyard. The fence was old and the wood slats were spaced just wide enough to let me see through. I slowed, my boots crunching on the gravel. Through the gap I saw Ethan, his hair a little longer than I remembered, running across the grass. And chasing him was a man I had never seen before. The man scooped Ethan up into his arms and spun him around, both of them laughing like they'd known each other forever. My smile froze. Then came the sound that made my blood run cold. "Come on, Dad," Ethan shouted. The word hit me like a sniper's bullet. Dad. I stood there, gripping the fence so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe it was a game. Maybe he was quoting something. Maybe I heard wrong. But the way Ethan's arms wrapped around that man's neck told me this wasn't pretend. I stepped back from the fence, my breath shallow. 10 months of sacrifice, of missing birthdays and bedtimes, of risking my life every day. And now my son was calling someone else Dad. I didn't storm in. I didn't yell. I walked to the front door, my boots suddenly feeling twice as heavy. My hand trembled as I turned the knob. Inside, the living room looked exactly the same couch, same photos on the wall. Except now, there was a new picture on the mantel. Ethan, the man from the backyard, and my wife, all smiling, like a family. My family. Without me. From the back door I heard voices. My wife's laughter, the man's deeper tone, Ethan's happy squeals. I stood there, staring at that picture, feeling my chest tighten. I had faced armed smugglers in the desert without flinching, but this broke something inside me. I didn't know it yet, but in the next few minutes, my entire life was going to change. I stood there in the living room, the faint smell of fresh coffee lingering in the air. That picture on the mantel burned into my mind. My own son, wrapped in another man's arms, his smile wide and genuine. I wanted to believe it was staged, a one-time thing. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The sliding glass door rattled, and moments later, Ethan came running in. His little sneakers squeaked against the hardwood floor as he stopped in his tracks. For a split second, his eyes lit up. "Dad?" he said, hesitant, like the word felt strange on his tongue. I knelt down, opening my arms. He came to me, and the moment his small body hit my chest, I felt a wave of relief. His warmth, his heartbeat. It was real. I closed my eyes, breathing in the scent of his hair, but just as quickly I noticed it. He wasn't holding on as tight as before. 10 months apart had left a space between us, a space someone else had been filling. Behind him, my wife appeared, wearing the same surprised smile she had the day I came home from my first overseas tour, but this time it felt forced. Her eyes darted toward the backyard. "You're home early," she said. "Early?" I echoed, my voice low. "I've been gone for almost a year." The man from the yard stepped into the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt like he belonged here. He didn't look away, didn't flinch. He just stood there with his hands in his pockets as if waiting to be introduced. "This is Mark," she said finally. "He's been helping out while you were gone." Helping out. The words twisted in my gut. Ethan looked up at me, oblivious to the storm building in my chest. "Dad, can Mark come with us when we go to the park later?" That was it. The crack inside me split wide open. I glanced at my wife, then at Mark, then back at my boy. I didn't want a scene, not in front of him. But I also knew I couldn't stay here, not another second. I told Ethan to grab his jacket. My wife started to protest, but one look from me stopped her cold. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't threatening, but she knew from the way my jaw locked that I was done. In my career, I'd been trained to make quick decisions under pressure. You see the threat, you act, no hesitation. That instinct kicked in now. Within 5 minutes, Ethan and I were in my truck. He asked where we were going, but I didn't answer right away. My hands were tight on the steering wheel, knuckles pale, eyes locked on the road ahead. As we pulled away, I saw Mark standing in the doorway, my wife's hand on his arm. The image seared itself into my memory. I wasn't just leaving my house, I was leaving everything behind. I didn't have a plan. All I knew was that I needed to get my son as far away from that scene as possible. Somewhere safe. Somewhere he'd remember who his father really was. I drove through the night, the hum of the tires and Ethan's quiet breathing filling the cab. We stopped only for gas and snacks, and with every mile, the weight on my chest eased just a little. By the time we crossed into the next state, I had made up my mind. We were going to my brother's place. He lived out in the countryside, a good 3 hours from the nearest big city. No one would think to look for us there. I pulled into his long gravel driveway just as dawn was breaking. The old farmhouse looked the same as it had for years. Weathered wood, wide porch, and the American flag hanging proudly from the post. My brother stepped outside, rubbing his eyes. "David, what the hell?" "Not now," I said, lifting Ethan from the passenger seat. "We just need a place to stay. I'll explain later." He looked at me, at the boy clinging to my shoulder, and simply nodded. Family didn't need explanations right away. They just needed to open the door. That morning, as I laid my son down in the spare bedroom, I made a silent promise. Whatever came next, I wasn't letting go of him again. But I knew the fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The first morning at my brother's house was quiet in a way I hadn't experienced in years. No radio chatter, no boots on gravel, no orders being barked over the hum of diesel engines. Just the soft creak of the old farmhouse settling into another day. Ethan was still asleep in the spare room, curled up under a thick quilt my sister-in-law had stitched years ago. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching his chest rise and fall. 10 months on the border had taught me to read a person's breathing. Tense and shallow meant danger, slow and steady meant safety. Right now, my boy was safe. That was all that mattered. Downstairs, my brother poured 2 mugs of coffee. He didn't ask questions at first, just slid one across the table. We sat there in silence, steam rising between us. Finally, he said, "You're gonna have to tell me what happened, David." I told him everything. The months away, the nights under the desert stars wondering if my family was asleep under the same sky, the thought of home that kept me going, and then the moment I saw Ethan in another man's arms calling him Dad. My voice didn't crack until I said that word. He leaned back, rubbing his jaw. "That's a hell of a thing, brother. But taking him like that, you know this isn't just going to blow over." "I don't care," I said, my tone sharper than I intended. "I'm not letting my son grow up thinking someone else is his father." He didn't argue. He just nodded slowly, the way soldiers do when they know a fight is coming, whether they want it or not. The next few days were a strange mix of calm and tension. Out here in the countryside, the air smelled of cut grass and wood smoke. The fields rolled out in shades of gold and green, and the sound of crickets replaced the constant hum of the Border Patrol vehicles. Ethan followed me everywhere, to the barn, to the chicken coop, even when I went to split firewood. We talked more in those days than we had in the entire year before I left. He told me about his school, his friends, the soccer games I'd missed, but whenever I asked about his mom, his words got shorter, his eyes drifting toward the floor. One afternoon, we were walking down to the creek behind the property when he stopped suddenly. "Why did you take me away?" he asked. I crouched down so we were eye level. "Because you're my son, and I need you to know that no matter what anyone says, I'm still your dad. Always." He didn't say anything right away, just kicked a rock into the grass and kept walking. I let the silence sit. Some truths don't land right away. They take time to root. That night after Ethan was asleep, my phone lit up with messages, missed calls from my wife. A text that read, "You can't just take him like this. We need to talk." Another one, harsher. "You're making a mistake, David." I turned the phone face down on the table. I'd seen enough threats in my life to know when one was coming wrapped in concern. My brother shook his head. "You can't hide forever. The law's gonna get involved sooner or later." "I'm not hiding," I said. "I'm giving my son a place where he remembers who he is, where he remembers me." The days stretched into a week. We fished in the creek, worked on a broken fence post, made pancakes on Saturday morning. Slowly, I saw changes in Ethan. The hesitation in his hugs started to fade. He began to laugh more, ask me questions about my time on the border, the safe stories, not the dangerous ones. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, he leaned against me. "Dad, when you were gone, Mom said you might not come back." My chest tightened. "She said that?" He nodded. "But Mark told me he'd be here no matter what. I didn't mean to call him Dad, it just happened." I put my arm around him, my voice steady. "I understand, buddy. You were just trying to make sense of things, but I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere." He didn't answer, but the way he rested his head on my shoulder told me enough. That night I lay awake long after Ethan had gone to bed. I thought about my service, about the years I'd given to protect strangers on the other side of the country, while the life I was building at home was quietly slipping away. I thought about the fight that was coming, the custody battles, the lawyers, the questions about whether I had the right to do what I'd done. And then I thought about Ethan's laugh that afternoon, the way he skipped stones across the creek like I'd taught him. Some things were worth fighting for, no matter the cost. As the crickets sang outside and the farmhouse settled into the stillness of night, I made my decision. I wasn't going back to my old life. The man who had returned from the border wasn't the same one who had left. I wasn't just a soldier anymore. I was a father on a mission, and I didn't plan on losing. A week after we'd arrived at my brother's, the quiet broke. It was a Tuesday morning, clear skies, the kind of day that makes you forget trouble for a moment. I was fixing the hinge on the back porch when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. My stomach tightened before I even turned around. A county sheriff's SUV rolled up the drive. Behind it, a dark sedan with tinted windows. I didn't need to guess who was inside. Ethan came out from the side yard, a wooden toy plane in his hands. "Who's that?" he asked. "Go inside, buddy," I told him gently. He hesitated, sensing the change in my voice, then nodded and slipped through the back door. The sheriff climbed out of his vehicle, adjusting his hat. "Staff Sergeant Turner?" "Yeah. We've got a situation here." He glanced toward the sedan. "Your wife's filed a report, says you took your son without consent." I clenched my jaw. My son. My blood. I didn't take him. I brought him home. "Home is with his mother," a voice called from the sedan. The rear door opened, and there she was, standing beside Mark. His hand rested on her shoulder like he had the right. "You need to bring him out," she said. "We can talk about this like adults." I stepped forward, but the sheriff put a hand up. "Let's keep this civil. We don't want to do this in front of the boy." Civil. That word didn't mean much when you'd seen what I'd seen. Cartel safe houses with walls full of bullet holes, the remains of people who didn't make it across. This wasn't a fight with weapons, but it was still a battle. "I'll talk to you," I said to my wife, "but not with him here." I jerked my chin toward Mark. "This is between us." She shook her head. "He's part of this now. You weren't here, David. Someone had to step in." My brother had come to the porch by then, arms folded. He didn't speak, but his presence was enough to remind me I wasn't standing alone. "Sheriff," I said, keeping my voice steady, "there's no court order here, right? No paperwork saying I can't have my own son?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Not yet. But this is going to get messy if it goes that way." I looked past him to Ethan, who was peeking through the kitchen window, his small face pressed to the glass. He didn't understand the legal talk. All he saw was tension, raised voices, and strangers in uniforms. "I'm not handing him over today," I said. "If she wants to take this to court, then we'll do it in court. But I'm not letting him walk out of here with—" I glanced at Mark, someone who's been in his life less than a year. Mark took a step forward. "You think being gone for 10 months makes you the hero here? I've been there for him. Every game, every scraped knee. You can't just erase that." I stepped closer, close enough for him to see the steel in my eyes. "You're right. I can't erase it, but I can make damn sure he knows who his father is." The sheriff's hand went to his belt, not in threat, but in warning. "Let's keep this calm, gentlemen." My wife's eyes were glistening now. "David, please, don't make this harder than it has to be." I wanted to tell her that she had made it hard the moment she let our son call another man dad. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I turned to the sheriff. "You have my word. He's safe here. We're not leaving the county. If you need to report back, tell them I'm willing to go through the process. But until a judge says otherwise, Ethan stays with me." The sheriff looked between us for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "I'll file it as is, but you better be ready. Lawyers, hearings, it's all coming." They left without Ethan. As the dust from their tires settled on the driveway, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Inside, Ethan was waiting in the hallway, clutching his toy plane. "Why was Mom here?" I knelt down, resting my hands on his shoulders. "Because she wants to see you, and she will, but right now you're staying with me." "Is Mark mad at you?" I smiled faintly. "Probably, but that's not your job to worry about. Your job is to be a kid. Let me handle the rest." That night I sat on the porch long after Ethan had gone to bed. My brother brought me another cup of coffee and dropped a manila envelope on the table. "Got a buddy in town who's a family lawyer," he said. "You'll want to call him in the morning." I stared at the envelope. I'd fought battles in uniform, with weapons and orders and clear objectives. But this was a different kind of war. One fought with paperwork, testimony, and the unshakable conviction that I was doing the right thing. Somewhere inside, I felt the old soldier's resolve hardening. The border had taught me patience, vigilance, and endurance. Now, I'd need all three. When I finally went upstairs, I checked on Ethan one last time. He was sprawled across the bed, mouth slightly open, the quilt tangled around his legs. In sleep, he looked younger, like the boy I'd left behind. I leaned against the doorframe and made another silent promise. I would not lose him. Not to the courts, not to another man, not to the slow erosion of time. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. The next morning, I was up before the sun. Years of service had wired me that way. I brewed coffee in the quiet kitchen, the smell filling the house, and sat at the table with the manila envelope my brother had given me. Inside were business cards, a few legal pamphlets, and a handwritten note from his friend. "This will be ugly. Remember why you're doing it." By the time Ethan padded into the kitchen in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes, I had already made my decision. I was going to fight. Not out of spite, not to punish anyone, but because my son deserved to know where he came from and who had stood by him when it counted. We spent that morning fixing the old swing in my brother's yard. Ethan handed me tools, asked questions about knots and bolts, and laughed when the seat tilted crooked on my first try. For a while, it felt like the world outside the property line didn't exist, but reality had a way of creeping in. Around noon, my phone buzzed. This time it wasn't my wife, it was the lawyer. We arranged to meet that afternoon in town. The drive to his office was quiet. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, legs swinging, looking out at the endless fields. "Are we going home soon?" he asked. I glanced at him. "We are home, buddy. Home is wherever we're together." He nodded, not fully understanding, but not pushing either. At the lawyer's office, Ethan sat in the reception area with my brother while I laid out everything. The deployment to the border, the moment I came home, the man in the yard, the sheriff's visit. The lawyer listened without interrupting, his eyes steady. "You've got a case," he said finally. "But it's not going to be quick. Family court can be unpredictable. You'll need to be ready for them to challenge your fitness as a parent. Bring up the time you were away." "I was serving my country," I said. "I know," he replied, "and any decent person would respect that. But courtrooms aren't about what's decent. They're about what can be argued and proven. You have to be prepared." The meeting lasted an hour, but it felt like a mission briefing before a deployment. We mapped out steps, deadlines, contingencies. By the time I left, I had a stack of forms and a clear sense of just how long this war might last. Back at the farmhouse, Ethan was outside with my brother, trying to fly a paper airplane off the porch. It didn't get far, but he didn't care. I stood there for a minute, watching him. His messy hair, the way he laughed when the plane nosedived into the grass. I realized that these moments, the quiet, ordinary ones, were the real victories. That night, as I tucked him in, he asked, "Dad, if I call you Dad and call Mark Dad too, is that bad?" The question hit me harder than I expected. I sat on the edge of the bed. "It's not bad to care about people," I said slowly. "But words matter, Ethan. When you call someone Dad, it means they've been there for you. Not just when it's easy, but when it's hard. It means they've fought for you, protected you, and never walked away." He thought about that for a moment, then whispered, "Like you." "Like me," I said, my voice tight. He reached out and hugged me. No hesitation this time, no distance in the way his arms wrapped around me. I felt the fight drain out of me, replaced by something heavier but steadier. Resolve. The weeks that followed weren't easy. There were court dates, tense exchanges, and more paperwork than I thought possible. My wife's lawyer argued that my absence had left a void, that Mark had filled it, that stability mattered more than biology. My lawyer countered with my record, my commitment, and witnesses who'd seen the bond between me and Ethan. Through it all, I kept showing up. Not just in court, but for Ethan. We fixed fences, went fishing, built a birdhouse out of scrap wood. Every project was a chance to remind him, without saying it outright, that his father was present, here, now, always. Months later, when the final hearing came, the judge didn't give me everything I wanted. Custody was shared, schedules were drawn, compromises made. But when Ethan walked out of that courtroom holding my hand, I knew I'd won the only part that mattered. Because here's the truth. Being a father isn't about winning titles or beating the other guy. It's about the everyday battles, the little choices that tell your child, "You matter to me more than anything else." Today, Ethan's older. He remembers that time like a blurry photograph, pieces of it sharp, others faded. But he knows one thing with absolute certainty. When his world got messy, his dad showed up, stayed, and fought for him. And as for me, I've been in firefights, stared down men with nothing to lose, and spent nights in places most people wouldn't last an hour. But nothing has ever tested me like the fight to keep my son. Some battles are fought with weapons. Others are fought with love and the refusal to walk away. And in the end, both kinds leave scars. I'll carry mine with pride.